Hello, historians. This is Mr. Fredo. Here we go, episode 2 in our study of the Renaissance for our quick mini lessons. An important question to ask: how does this start? Prior to this time period in Western Europe's history was around 1,000 years of just death, disaster, and misery within the Middle Ages. So, how does this completely different time period, when the light goes back on and people in Europe and Europe as a whole come back to life, how does that happen? Well, there isn't really a simple answer for that. It's really a combination of several factors that independently come in contact with each other or find ways to intermix that ends up creating this new time period. It's kind of like actually how like middle school relationships start. You have a crush on someone, so then you tell your friend to go talk to them, and then that person hears about it, so they tell another friend on whether or not they like you back, and if they like you back, then they bring in someone else to kind of set up the first time that you're going to talk to each other. It's a really roundabout way of getting something to happen. That's kind of how the Renaissance starts as well. So we focus on four main factors that causes the shift from the Middle Ages to this new time period, the Renaissance. And it all starts with the end of the Black Death. Until this Black Death doesn't go away, Europe has no chance of fighting out of the Middle Ages because of the destruction that it caused. Because people started to isolate themselves and they stopped trading and they stopped interacting, that allowed the disease to effectively die out throughout Western Europe to the point where it wasn't going to spread as massively as it did before. So it kind of gives them a breath of, no pun intended, fresh air where they can get back to doing things. As soon as that isolation has taken into effect and the disease has died out, people move back into the cities. And that's when people start to talk again. They start to collaborate again. They start to be able to interact and come up with new ideas that they couldn't do as long as the Black Death was around. That's really the first step. Second big event is the rediscovery of Greek and Roman ideas that had been destroyed throughout Europe but were preserved in the Holy Land, and they're rediscovered during the Crusades. All of those great Greek and Roman ideas that focused on science and artwork and engineering and not just about religion, they had been destroyed in Europe over the course of hundreds of years for a variety of factors. One, just because of the simple destruction that occurred throughout the Middle Ages. But two, also because of the Catholic Church would take those books, and if they contradicted Catholic Church teachings in any way, they would be set on fire. So those ideas and those philosophies and beliefs, they were destroyed throughout Western Europe, but they were preserved in the Holy Land because this is an area that wasn't affected by the death and destruction of the Middle Ages in Western Europe. And this is a place where the Greeks had set up colonies near, and this is a place where the Romans had conquered. So when the Europeans travel there, they find all of the, remember, the Crusades took place over a couple hundred years. Over time, they come in contact and come back in contact with these ideas that they never even knew existed. And over a course of a long period of time, those ideas are brought back to Western Europe. And when put in use and put in place, and they become actually used, it creates a different world because instead of just focusing on religion, now they're focusing on Greek and Roman ideas about science and art and architecture. And again, it creates a complete shift in thinking. Number three, maybe the most important invention in the history of the world, the Gutenberg printing press. Prior to this printer, that's what it is. Books were extremely rare in Western Europe, and they were extremely expensive because there were so few of them. They cost a lot of money just to own, and most of them were only in Latin. The Gutenberg printing press changes all of that. Instead of having to copy these books in Latin by hand like monks would do in monasteries, the Gutenberg press acts like printers do today. Now, obviously not as fast as some of the printers that we have now, but still much faster than the going standard of copying these books by hand. And they can be printed in native languages, so the languages that people actually understood. So if you're from Italy, you could get a book in Italian. If you were from Spain, you could get a book in Spanish. And it could be about all different types of topics, about science, about math, about engineering, about artwork, you name it. All of those were available because the Gutenberg press allowed so many different books to be printed. And perhaps most importantly, because there's more books, the price goes way down. Now that there's so many, they're not as expensive, and that gives the population of Europe a greater accessibility to knowledge. This is essentially like the internet of the 1400s by the time it's created in 1450. Major game changer with this invention. And then lastly, guilds. Guilds are these organizations of people who all do the same thing and really care about the quality of the work that they produce. So there could be any type of guilds. There could be sculpting guilds. There could be painting guilds. There could be guilds for finance or banking. But all of these people are working in the same environment and they're competing against each other because they know in order to be accepted into that guild, their work has to be of the highest quality, because the only way you were going to be taken seriously as a professional, regardless of what your profession was if you were accepted into a guild. That gave you credibility. That was a big deal. So the guilds, and because of the competition created within a guild, it raises the quality of everything that's produced throughout Western Europe in a big, big way. One of the decisions you're going to have to make as a historian is which of these factors is most responsible for the start of the Renaissance. And it's a tough choice because as you really examine these, you'll start to see that there's a lot of overlap between these four main factors in the shift from Middle Ages to this great time period, the Renaissance.